Welcome to Blue Monday, as ever, with me, Les, Dave, and Rodger. Been quite eventful since the last one. Everton have progressed to the fourth round of the FA Cup in a quite uninspiring and freezing cold game against Peterborough. And there was a small matter of a change in manager. Just want to get your thoughts on that quickly, lads, before we sort of dig into it any more. What were your initial thoughts when David Moyes was announced? Well, when Sean Dyche was sacked as well. I think the time where that was a bit strange, but what were your thoughts when Moyes was brought in? Pretty quickly, I've got to say, by the club, they did act quite decisively. Rodger, I'll come to you first.
Oh, thanks. Do you know what? All over the place, really. I'm not sure even now, almost a week on. Well, it's not a week on, is it? 4 or 5 days on. What I think about it. I was slightly taken down a rabbit hole by John Blaine, which is an image some people may never get out of their mind, sending me that Turkish news story which said we were interested in Jose Mourinho, and I'm a long-standing Jose fan, and personally, although a lot of people would disagree, but I think the club needed wholesale change, still does need wholesale change, and I thought one man who could come in and really shake things up was Jose. Clearly unrealistic. I know he'd worked for the Friedkins before. Do they still like him? Do they not? What about getting João Pinto up the road? I could have popped around and seen him from Bournemouth and put in a good word. So I was really, really excited that we might be getting Jose. And then clearly David Moyes is the safe pair of hands. Everybody can see that, and I can reconcile myself to that. 2.5-year deal. Is it worth the paper it's written on? Is any manager's contract worth the paper it's written on? Probably not. And I suppose the question I'm left with is which version of David Moyes we're going to get this time, because he had a tremendous time at Everton. He managed us for 518 games, actually only secured an average of 1.14 points per game, but there were some good times, there was some good football, there were some European adventures, there was a cup final, and we had an identity, whether we liked it or not. Knife to a gunfight, we had an identity. He's then had a slightly up and down career since then. Obviously, Man United didn't go according to plan. Why would it? And he left us under a bit of a cloud, said a few stupid things, tried to pinch a few players. Didn't go well for him there. Ferguson's replacement was never going to succeed. He's then gone to Sociedad in Spain. Didn't do particularly well there. Lasted a season and a bit. 42 games, 1.2 points a game.
He did give us a very funny press conference there, though, didn't he?
Yeah, okay, he did. Yeah.
So that was good value.
Yeah, he's always thinking of it. It's always good value. I'll be interested, Dave, to hear your experiences of dealing with him in the media. Sunderland was a pretty unmitigated disaster. Took them down, I think. 43 games, less than a point a game. West Ham saved them. 31 games first time around, 1.1 points per game, and then he went back, for 4 and a bit years, 230 games, 1.5 points per game. So which Moyes are we going to get? The Sunderland version, the West Ham version, Sociedad version? Don't know.
Hopefully not the Sunderland version.
That would not be good. And I think when you look at his career, the longer he spends at the club, the better he gets.
Yeah.
And that's the key point, isn't it? And we need, we've got 4 home games out of 5 coming up. So we need some points and we need some action pretty quickly. He's got squad limitations, limited budget. Who knows? I'm reconciled to it. I'm happy with it. I'll get right behind him. Of course I will. But I'm a bit disappointed because I wanted Jose, if that's fair enough.
Yeah, well, that. I'll come on to that next thing then about sort of how long he gets. Obviously, he's got a 2.5-year deal. We know with Sam Allardyce, he got an 18-month deal. He was only ever doing 6 months. I do feel Moyes might get a bit longer. But as you say, his thing is he gets into a club, and certainly last time he was at Everton, he sort of looked after the entire running of the football operation at the club. He was very hands-on, did everything. Dave, for me, he built a really effective side, sort of 04-05, not the prettiest. And then he built 2 really good sides for me. The sort of 07-08-09 side, and then again the sort of 11-12 side. I thought there was a couple of really good. Go ahead, Rog. Sorry,
just before Dave comes in and before people start shouting at their phones or screens, he was 1.54 points a game at Everton, not 1.14. I misread my notes.
You would have got pulled on that.
That's my mistake. 1.54 points per game across 518 games. That's pretty decent.
Yeah, that is decent. Yeah, and I think Dave, his success at West Ham that was sort of built on a very similar style to those Everton teams, where you had sort of similar players in similar positions. You had like Souček for Fellaini, you had Jared Bowen for sort of maybe the Kevin Morales type play. There was a lot of similarities in how that team worked. It was all built on a solid defence first and foremost. He's coming to Everton with a solid defence, which is a good platform to build on. Do you think he's got what he needs ahead of that, though? Do you think he can get more out of these players, or do you think they'll not fit the system he gets into? What are your sort of thoughts on where you think this will sort of play out?
Do you know, I was only thinking about this, and we've seen so many different opinions about him. I think he's been a victim of his own success, in inverted commas. I know he's got his one trophy at West Ham, and I think we're getting a manager now, version of Moyes, where you can pick any part of his career as a manager and say, oh, he's absolutely shit, he's woeful at managing football teams. And then there's other times where you can think Everton were really good, like you've mentioned there, in two different eras, really. And you can say that about West Ham. Sociedad, what you referred to there was quite funny. You could barely say hola. And then looking at Man United there, won 27 of 51 games. I can't think of many since then who's actually done that, given how bad they've been.
I think United stands up against anyone.
Absolutely.
But it's their expectation, wasn't it? Their expectation was we're going to keep winning league titles. We look at our expectation. This guy is following arguably the three worst managers we've had in our history, in Benitez, Lampard, and Dyche. Forget Mike Walker, but you know our bar's pretty low here. If you're not Frank Lampard, you're not Rafael Benitez, and you're not Sean Dyche, you're onto a winner.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really important point, which I think we'll get onto about him. But I feel he's a little hard done by. He's really, really naive when he went to Man United, although. Look, at that time, you're not going to let it down, turn it down when you've got Alex Ferguson saying that, you know, he wants you. You never really want to be the one after the one, you know, when you're taking over the legend in a football club, because you're simply not going to get anywhere near the level in which they had, let alone with him, who's probably one of the best managers in the history of football. And then I think, you know, looking at the stats there, I didn't realise he spent so long at West Ham in his second spell.
Yeah.
His first one, obviously a bit crap. I think his reputation then following Sunderland, I think, you know, he's come in there to put some fires down, hasn't he, really, when he first went in at West Ham. He goes back there after Pellegrini, was it?
That's right, yeah. After Pellegrini.
Which, I mean, he was neither here nor there, was he? And I didn't realise 231 games in charge. Yeah. Which just did not. He just, you know, those type of things would just pass you by.
Yeah.
When you just think, oh yeah, he's the West Ham manager, but because he was with us so long, you start thinking, oh, he hasn't been there that long. Given how long he was in charge of us. I think in bringing him in, it's not a brave move. It's a sensible move. It's something we've gone and done. With the view to staying in this division, and then hate this term, but you know, the clean slate in the summer, looking ahead to what's going to happen. Dare to say as well, it's similar to when Sean Dyche came in, because he's got a season. It's actually very, very similar to 2002 when he came in and took us over.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah,
we were in the process of with a really poor squad. Which I think it's an interesting debate for another time. If you were to compare the squad he's taken over now to the one he took over in 2002. But when he came in there, successfully stayed up, some really good performances and results toward the end. It was free-flowing football. If you remember back to the second half of 2002, I think we went to Derby and won 4-3. And then
got walloped 6-2 by Newcastle the game after that.
I remember that, yeah. But he kept us up relatively comfortably in 2002, which I'm pretty sure we'd all take right now. And the way in which he plays, again, I think it's quite lazy to say, oh, do you know what, his football's terrible, you don't really want to watch it, and indicated the evidence of that in his last couple of years when he was in charge of us. Because that was some of the best, in my era as an Everton fan, in my time as an Everton fan, some of the best football we played was in those last couple of seasons before he ended up leaving. Look, you can touch all over the place where you think there's issues there. that defeat against Wigan will never go out of my mind to get us to get us further down to Wembley. Sunderland, like you say there, Roger. I think I remember speaking to him after he finished at Sunderland, and this was just a charity event. I said, "Do you feel like there was a sense of naivety in what you did there?" He said, "No." He said, "If you remember, there were several times when he was at Everton where he said, I'd like to manage abroad at some point. It's one of the things he'd like to have done with his career." He's simply gone to a club there that, well, first of all, he didn't have any lessons to learn how to speak Spanish. I think that's a massive issue. I think that's an issue where you see what happens to the likes of Gary Neville when he went to Valencia that time.
Yeah.
Which was, these are quite hysterical when you think back to these moments. And then, his time away before he then goes on to Sunderland again, and somebody else who's another club that's going down there. And then West Ham come about. I feel as if watching them, West Ham were a defensive unit that were really, really good in counter-attacking. I think we're getting on Moyes where, yes, we're not going to have more of the ball than the opponents. I think you need to take into account here that are we really that side that can effectively do that anyway, given the personnel that we have. So, we all go on Wednesday against Aston Villa. If you go in there thinking that Everton are going to play 4-3-3 and they're going to have this free-flowing football where we have 60% possession, it's just not going to happen. The reason it's not going to happen is why he will get an unfair crack of the whip when he starts now. And I know it's probably a debate we're going to go on to in terms of what he needs to do to go beyond this summer. The contract, I think, is really interesting. 2.5-year deal from different owners. Look what happens with Dyche. But I think the overwhelming thought that I have from the new owners bringing in David Moyes, and the reason why I say it's sensible, is that they've clearly had a good look at what Everton have been like in the last 15 years, let's say, in the Premier League era. Let's go as far as saying that. And they thought, well, who's been the most effective and reliable one to get in? And it's been him by a country mile. Everton's, it's hard to say, the most successful period in Premier League football. A lot of people would say Joe Royle. I think there's definitely, there's a candle for that sort of debate. David Moyes is by far and away the most successful manager that we've had since the early years of the Premier League. And, these guys don't look like they give too much of a shit if things aren't going their way. They will make a change, which I don't know what your view on this. Maybe it's the way football works these days with a lot of owners. Look at Chelsea, for instance. I know Everton are nowhere near Chelsea, but they certainly do make those decisions when they feel they have to. And that's where I think when Moyes is coming in here now, the sense of pressure he's going to be in straight from the off from us as fans is going to be huge for him. But also, I do wonder what the remit is beyond this season, because these guys will fully expect Everton to still be a Premier League side. When we finish this, they'll make no mistake, we're close to relegation. And that needs to be front and centre of everybody's concerns about getting David Moyes back, whether you like him or not, whether you like the colour of his head or not. That's the issue we've got, is staying in this division. So therefore, he's the best man for the job. I would love what Rodger said there about just, listen, we've had enough of this doldrum shite at the football club. Go and get Jose Mourinho, and if we go down, you go down in a blaze of glory.
Well, this is the next thing I want to come on to, really, before we look at what Moyes has to do next. Everton is a very, very insular club and always has been. We always go back to the well-timed time again. Historically, we've gone for former players as managers. You look at Harry Catterick was a former player. He was replaced by Billy Bingham, who was a former player. Broke the mold a bit with Gordon Lee, but then went to Howard Kendall, Colin Harvey, Howard Kendall, Joe Royle. The list goes on. To be fair, it's not worked out so well when we've gone for people who haven't been past players. But obviously, Moyes coming back, it feels very much in that sort of mould. It's a typical Everton thing to do, which I think even Moyes' biggest fans, I think they'd have to be tinged with a little bit of, could we have done something else? Could we have got someone better? Now, it's whether those managers were available. And you do kind of think, is this just a bit of a marriage of convenience for the new owners because David Moyes was available? he's a better manager than Sean Dyche. Let's make no bones about it. He is a better manager than Sean Dyche. So he's an obvious choice. Do you think we're in danger of going down that route and getting stuck in that rut again, whereby he might see out this 2.5-year contract and then, who knows, he might extend it. If that happens, I would imagine we're doing quite well, and it's not a bad thing. But Rodger, I mean, we'll just pick up on a little bit what you said before. Do you think we've missed an opportunity there? Could we have? Should we have maybe? Do you think maybe because Sean Dyche pretty much forced their hand and sort of said, "I'm out, lads. I want my payoff, but I'm out." Do you think that's where this has come from, or do you think they may have gone down that route anyway? It's a tough thing to say, but
yeah, a bit of crystal ball gazing, really, or kind of guesswork. But my biggest fear in all of this, right, is cultural regression. That's that we just go back to go back to the mean, how we've always been. Let's get something we know. Let's get something comfortable. All these new people coming in, they didn't work, so let's go back to someone we knew. But on your point on Dyche, what disappoints me is that he was calling the shots Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, and I think that reflects very badly on the owners, because the minute they came in through the door, he should have been brought in, and they should have had a full and frank discussion. I don't care whether he gets 5 million comp or 2 million comp or 3 million comp. I don't care. It's nothing. It's nothing compared to Premier League survival, right?
Yeah.
And the performance we put in at Bournemouth, absolutely dreadful. I'm glad that I was there to see his last game in charge, because he should not have been our manager. He should have been out the door immediately they came in. And the fact that he kind of held us to ransom for 2 or 3 days really sticks in my craw. Now, obviously, Moyes was the only one available in terms of no compensation. So you're not going to go out and pay money to another club. They didn't clearly want to do that. And he's a safe pair of hands. You might think, because he's performed well before at the club and he's performed well at West Ham. The thing about him is, and everybody sort of says, "Oh, well, I'm sort of behind him," I think Moyes wins on single transferable vote. He's a lot of people's first choice, but he's pretty much everybody's second choice, right? So he's popular. Everybody can get. There's a few that will never forgive him for the way he left, but it's this. We go back to the familiar, and the familiar hasn't worked because we haven't won a pissing trophy. Come on. We are not competitive. We need to shake things up. This cozy, Baines, and it was God. Did Ken Wright write that script? Baines and Coleman in the dugout. Oh, dear. I mean, it's just so sentimental. And I said that on social media and got a load of grief because, it's pragmatic. You need to realise it's pragmatic. It was a pragmatic decision, but it's quite a disappointing one, really. Is this, we've spunked 800 million quid and more probably, and we've gone back to the guy who left us, 11, 12 years ago. And we've been all the way around this fairground ride, and we've ended up back at square one with Moyes. I'm pretty convinced that he will keep us up, because I think he's got enough tactical nous, and I think he's got enough of an eye for a player, short-term deals for people in the transfer market. And I think he'll also put more pressure on Thelwell, because he wants to run the show, and I don't think he's going to have Thelwell rocking up with Arno Danjuma impersonators or whatever. He's going to want control over everything. And I suppose the appointment reflects how little confidence the Freakins have got in the squad, that they're not prepared to take a risk, right? They weren't prepared to say Michael Carrick or Fonseca or even Mourinho. These players, they need carrying over the line. And the fans have done it for 2-3 years. They now need a manager who's going to pick them up and carry them over the line and get the points they need. Let's make no bones about it. We've got 4-5 massive games coming up. 4 of them are at home and 1 away at Brighton. These 4 home games, we have to win 2 or 3 of them, because otherwise Ipswich are coming with a wet sail. Wolves won't hang around. And I suspect that Leicester will struggle more than those 3. So I think we're in a dogfight with Wolves and Ipswich, both of whom have got attacking flair, pace and creativity, and seem to me to be a bit more dynamic than Everton.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on Thelwell there, I think it's something that's not really considered. So we're pretty much past, I think, like you alluded to, Dave, with managers, we're pretty much past the point where a manager is going to be in his job for 10, 12, 15, 20 years. It just doesn't seem like it's going to work like that anymore. So that's where the director of football becomes dead important. Doesn't feel like this would be a Kevin Thelwell appointment, does it? If you're Kevin Thelwell as director of football, you don't want someone like David Moyes, who's been at the club before, and regardless of any success we did or didn't have, he ran that club very well under the circumstances. The players he brought in, he very rarely missed. There were a few, but he very, very rarely missed with the players that he brought in. As we said, he built a couple of really good teams. What do you think what do you think this says maybe about Kevin Thelwell's position? Because it feels like very much a board decision, this, and not his.
I think he should be out.
Agreed.
I think he should be out. I wouldn't say effective immediately like Dyche, but because there's a difference, isn't it? I mean, is time consuming and time based. Compared to Dyche, he's not responsible for the games. He's responsible for the team that's on the pitch, obviously, and the players, the tools that he's allowed to work with. Excuse me about my throat, by the way. With the way he's been, the players he's bought, and obviously that'll be done to a T by various people talking about how this is going to look towards Moyes. I feel as if with Moyes we need to take into account that generally successful on the transfer market, particularly if you think back to those early years when it was the likes of Les Scott and obviously Baines, and then the Morales, Pienaar,
even down to Marcus Bent, players like that.
Yeah, Marcus Bent did a great job playing up front on his own. Look, I think we're in an era now where people are more asked about what they look like, what they look at in front of them than the scoreline. And I refer back to that old guy that I was by season before last, 1-0 up against Brighton, and he got off at half time saying that he didn't want to watch what he was watching. I think that's where, and maybe a younger generation look towards these days, in that I'm not going to watch Everton on the telly. I'm not going to make an appointment when Everton are playing the early kickoff on a Sunday afternoon because of the way Everton play. That will come into the minds of many fans, and maybe that's what you're in football for. You're paying a lot of money to go and watch them. You're not going to want to pay money to watch a pile of shite. Therefore, that means the result itself gets onto a knife edge, doesn't it? Really, because Everton win a game, it becomes a moot point to say that we played crap there because we've got the 3 points, and I think that's where we are right now. I don't care how we play. I really don't care how we play. I don't care how much of the ball we have. I don't care how many goals we score, obviously, as long as we don't lose. That, to me, ticks a lot of what David Moyes is about. Look, we're not going to score mounds of goals, but I think you have to be, again, sensible to look at somebody with his record, to look at somebody with the solidity that he arranges his team to set up at, and then combine that with the opinion you have on the squad as well. And that's where I think that it's going to be difficult to make an honest assessment of Moyes coming back, even if we stay up, to be honest, because now that's the minimum. Well, it's the only requirement as far as I'm concerned. People have started talking about, well, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. He's got to get Calvert-Lewin going. Maybe he can use Beto a bit. There are loads of different facets to that, the way in which the team is. I honestly think that people will put it by the wayside that he's got a minimal amount of quality squad to work with when he first come back. That had to be said, first and foremost, with any manager that came in. With Moyes, it's emphasised that a lot of people didn't want him. So there's a lot of psychological stuff going on in and behind this with fans. And look, I'm still pretty sure on Wednesday that Goodison will be bouncing one way or the other, really, with him back. And look, the club, you mentioned Bill Kenwright there, Rodger, bless him, this is his right in the middle of his sort of
absolutely
his wheel, isn't it, really, when you look at Moyes coming back. You look at the video they even made on when he was announced the other day. Look, I'd be wrong in saying that I didn't get sort of little tingle in the spine looking at him, thinking of some of the great days we had with David Moyes, which, it's quite pitiful, really, to still think that that's one of them. He achieved some of the main things that have been, again, in inverted commas, our most successful period. Can he do it again? Do we need? Well, yeah, absolutely. That's the big question, isn't it? Can he go get Everton into a sustainable side that can compete for European competition in the Premier League? I look at the division now. Again, I've done a lot of comparison between now and then. And again, I don't see much quality in the Premier League these days. Again, similar to 2002 when it was Arsenal United sort of days then, wasn't it? Right now, you've got more sides, aside from this one with the shite, you've got more sides who are competitive for the Premier League title. You've probably got 4 of you. Look at what Chelsea were like. So, look, Everton are lifetimes away from that, absolutely. Below that, though, you look at Newcastle's, you look at Fulham now, you look at Bournemouth, who their manager's done a fantastic job. I think they're lowering the tree for Everton to not be too far away from that. Look, I'm not saying, and people will kick off at this, I'm not saying that, we stay up and we'll go into Bramley-Moore and, we're flying and we'll get into even a top half finish. Penny, the thought on that is remarkable, isn't it, given where we've been in the last few years? But he stays up. He's got a lot of wiggle room, I think, because that is the priority, and it will remain the priority. It will change going to Bramley-Moore. I want to refer that to Rodger, really. How much changes for David Moyes' future, short-term or long-term, if we stay up? Because we've seen with Sean Dyche, albeit under Moshiri, he was given another year. Well, obviously it turns out to be nearly 2, but he was given another full season there based on the fact that he'd achieved what the club needed him to achieve. Are the Freakins going to be that way? Are they going to be owners who think, you know what, this guy deserves another season, maybe 2 seasons, and let's see if he can progress Everton? And the third point with that would be, what would you regard as a successful season for Everton, given the circumstances in which he comes back to?
You're passing that to me, that hospital.
Yeah, sorry, sorry.
You a terrible pass there, Rog.
Let me just go back to a quote of David Moyes, right? Just for a bit of fun. He says, "It feels great to be home. I've missed being here because I really enjoyed it, and I feel like I've got unfinished business, so I can't wait to get started." Right?
Yeah,
so
well, that's
he didn't say that recently. He said that in 2019 when he rejoined West Ham.
Right, okay, I didn't know that. I was going. Did you want to jump in there? I was going to assume that's what he said, thinking, that's what everybody says when they go back to a football club.
Of course it is. Yeah. Listen, it's tongue in cheek and it's a little bit naughty, but he said he was going home to West Ham and he had unfinished business. So there you go. What does success look like? It clearly just looks like staying in the Premier League, but to this season, next season, we've got all these players out of contract and we should have some money to spend, and we're hopefully much freer of the financial regulations and limitations. I think to pick up on your point about the Bournemouths of this world and the Fulhams of this world and even the Newcastles, what they've shown is how quickly you can actually get in to the top half. This is not this doesn't have to take 10 years. A smart manager, some good recruitment and a plan, and some players who fit that plan. I think Fulham, Bournemouth, Brentford, Brighton are evident, but Bournemouth probably and Fulham as the 2 most recent ones getting in there and being quite. I'm not pleased we've got Bournemouth at home in the FA Cup. They're a bloody tricky opponent, and they've already beaten us twice. And as a pal of mine messaged me after the draw, he said, if they beat us 3 times this year, do they get to this season? Do they get to keep us? Possibly. And for anyone who's interested, no, I'm not coming up with the away supporters. What does success look like beyond that?
See more Everton games, Rodger, if you did.
Yeah, true. That's true. I think it's got to be, if I were the Friedkin group and he keeps us up, I'd definitely want to see progression. And I think a top half finish for a squad that you can invest 50+ million in next year should be a realistic target. And if he does that, we'll all be very happy. And then you can build on that and perhaps push for a European place the season after. They're going to want to make them. I mean, you're not going to fill Bramley-Moore if you're, bouncing around the bottom of the league and playing shit. You're not going to fill it because the World Cup demand's not necessarily going to be there once you've passed the novelty factor of the new stadium. So, this season, stay up. I don't care how the hell you do it and start by winning games. Villa, tricky. Spurs, tricky. We could beat both of them. We could lose both of them. We all know that, don't we? Brighton away, could lose that. Leicester at home, have to win.
Yeah.
The derby, I mean, we've got to do another 5 games, haven't we? 5-game prediction. How many points? I'm going for 9. There you go.
Oh God, 5. I'll go 5 again. Just on that then, it's clear that the limitations of the squad are once we passed the halfway line, we've been absolutely wretched. Now, I think Moyes has got a better idea of how to set up a team to attack a bit better than Dyche has. But if we're honest about it, the attacking options aren't good. These players we've got going forward aren't particularly good. I think they're better than what we've seen, but still not ideal. I think if you look at the way the players have been bought, Thelwell's prepared formation was a 5-3-2. He was clearly buying players for a 5-3-2. Sean Dyche was never that manager. I don't think David Moyes is that manager. So does Moyes need to go out and buy some players to fit into a system that he wants to make our attacking options better? Or do you think there's enough there for him to play with to get more out of us in attack? Because that's ultimately what's going to keep us up, isn't it? We can eke out all these draws that all we want, and draws against Arsenal, City, Chelsea, they'll keep you up so long as you're beating Southampton, so long as you're beating Leicester, so long as you're getting 3 points in those games. Those draws are enough to keep you up. Otherwise, they're not. So the big thing for Moyes here is he's got to sort the attack out, really. The defence should look after itself. Could be an issue as well with the fullbacks. Patterson, if he plays Patterson, as we've seen in the last couple of games, he's fine going forward. It's whether he stays fit again. Mykolenko, he's an issue because he can't do that overlapping fullback thing. It seems that Moyes would prefer. So there's a lot of parts of that team that probably don't really sit well with what he wants. Do you think it's feasible that he goes out and buys players now? Because I suppose there's more long-term aspect to it because he's got 2.5 years, so we can plan for the future a bit. But
well, according to Mika Richards, Mykolenko's been really good.
Oh, fair enough.
Did you watch that?
As Mika Richards been good.
Yeah, that's Mika Richards, Lineker and Shearer telling us what a huge gamble we've taken and how irresponsible it was to sack Dyche when we all know that he bloody walked. Anyway, sorry. Yes, strikers. Sorry, Dave, I've jumped in ahead of you. But strikers, we need one. We need goal scorers. We haven't got enough. And I think, if I recall correctly, Moyes has a good eye for a striker. You know, whether it's Yak, whether it's Louis Sahar, whether it's Marcus Bent. Obviously, Tim Cahill-Came's a great goal scorer, attacking midfielder. And I'd like to think he might be able to pluck a gem from somewhere that we might have heard of. I quite like the guy at Middlesbrough, Latte Lath. Apparently, he's going to the what's it called? The MLS for 20 million. Maybe he wants to come. He's scored a lot of goals for Middlesbrough under Carrick, but maybe he can find someone who'll come in and score a few goals because we need them. At top of the pitch is rubbish. I mean, if Calvert-Lewin is off to Atalanta and we can get a few quid for him, maybe there's some money to reinvest as well, which won't. We've got a bit more to spend within the guidelines. He has had Morales, etc. He's had a good eye for a goal scorer, whether that's an attacking midfielder or a central striker. So I think we need one. I don't think we've got enough goals in this squad at the moment. They're just not there.
Yeah. Just one other thing as well on that. I know we had Tim Cahill, but he did get by for like 2 seasons without a recognised striker. I think it was after we sold Jermaine Beckford. I don't think we had a recognised striker for 2 years then. I think we had Cahill and Fellaini. So we maybe, he can work within those sorts of restrictions. It's not ideal, but he might be able to find something, I suppose, might in what we've got.
It doesn't matter where the goals come from. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where they come from. But we need some. We're not going to create that many chances because we're not going to have that much of the ball. So we need people who can put it in the back of the net when that chance comes along.
I was just going to say, the likes of Tim Cahill don't grow on trees like they used to.
No.
And I mean that in regards to who you can get in for a cheap amount of money. Are we in a position where you can go and look into the Championship right now? Time's against us here. You've got 18 days to try and get some in. You get somebody in, whatever amount we can spend. Which I refer back to it all the time. The conversation I had with Patrick Reed is he sort of worked out that it was around about 8 to 10 million maximum that we could go and throw in January. I'm not too sure what that's going to get you these days.
No,
loan wise as well. Sorry, Roger, what was that?
No, very little for that amount of money.
Yeah, exactly. Loan market wise, I'm not sure where we'd stand in dipping our toe into that as well, which again is right in a Moyes' forte, isn't it, in what he's been able to do.
Yes, I think the question is whether we can send Rodger back if Broger's injured. Yeah. Sadly, if we can send him back and free up a slot, I mean, we're never going to get to cancel the Jack Harrison loan, but we're full of domestic loans.
I completely agree. Completely agree with that. I think Look, I mean, the thing that I feel sorry for him, obviously, is the injury, but also in the capacity that how much of a chance was he ever going to get anyway when we got him in on loan? It was almost like I think Dice with signing somebody like that, and to a certain extent, Beto, I think it excites fans when you just see ST next to their name and you see what position they actually play in, because these guys didn't actually get, I wouldn't say a chance to the team, but we realised that, that particularly Beto was not good enough for the Premier League, and Rodger, look, Chelsea were happy to get him out on loan. I think it's unfair that we haven't seen him, of course.
Beto and Brozier should be 2 nails in Thelwell's coffin. Beto because he's clearly not good enough. Brozier, it's a gamble signing a player when he's injured. And when even if you're signing a player on loan, that takes up a loan spot. And if the club is saying to you, he's not going to be ready until October, and you still sign him, that's a huge gamble. He's been injured twice. He's played, 3 or 4 games? He's been injured in 2 of them now. So he injured himself down at Bournemouth, didn't he? And then he got wiped out there. But, I think he was unlucky to get badly injured there. But, that's 2 injuries across 4 games. So he's clearly just going to be one of those players he's just never going to be fit. And, when we're in the position we're in, to gamble on a player like that, it's huge, and it was another misstep for me from Thelwell. Anyway, carry on with where you think we get goals from in the squad.
Yeah,
if they're the nails in the coffin, Jack Harrison's the lid.
It's got to be.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. And modern day football plus David Moyes is a massive question mark, isn't it? Really, and the way in which this is going to work out, where director of footballs wasn't part of David Moyes when he was a relative success at Everton, remains to be seen how he works with that, and what the owners see that as. I mean, we've spoken before. We maybe like to see him up there in and amongst the owners, director of football going forward. But that remains to be seen whether he's in that sort of category of being a man who can do that. His transfer window with us is pretty successful. So, you could possibly see that. And dare to say, a manager may well be able to work on their own in transfer windows. Can they no longer do that? Is that non-existent now? Seemingly so. You've got to have a director of football. That model for me isn't for everyone yet. Every club you see, it's something that's maybe first or second on what they discuss in how their team plays football, which I don't like. I don't like that in modern day football, directors of football, and you only see it successful as, I don't know. I think you see it less successful in a manager you go on a point, if that makes sense, when you've got a director of football, because I think these days, obviously, it's more proactive as it's ever been, that role. But I mean, what was Moyes like at West Ham? Was there a general transfer committee? Was there anything like that? I mean, I intrigued to see what Moyes is allowed to do in the transfer market. I think he's got a CV that he can take to the club and say, look, I've done this, I've done that. This is where other people would then say that he's a dinosaur, because that you can't do that these days, and you're not going to be able to open the door and say, listen, come and join Everton anymore. He has to go and ask his mum to be able to do that, if you get what I mean. So with that side of stuff, I think that he has to change. He has to become a more modern day football manager. With West Ham, I think he was, by and large, in the last few days. Interested in their opinions that he's coming to Everton and their thoughts. And Matt's done a fantastic piece there, if you haven't listened to it yet. A lot of them that I've heard, spoken to, won't have him at all. A lot of them were really pleased with what he did at that club. And do you know it? The thing that they had the biggest issue with was the way in which he played, the way in which this side played under David Moyes, because it was really early. He raises the bar that high performance-wise, that will decide what fans, and to an extent with TFG, it looks like their future at clubs, really. And that was the difficulty for them at West Ham, because they went and won a trophy the year before. If Everton win, and people have took the piss out of this, if Everton were going to go and win the 3rd-tier European trophy, you wouldn't see me for months, because I'd be off going absolutely ballistic that Everton have gone and won a trophy since I've been actively a football fan. If he goes and delivers that, David Moyes is a hero to me.
Of course he is.
Like I say, it's all in relevance to the way your football club is these days. We'll get the piss taken out of us by them over the road and all that sort of thing. But his demeanour as well, and you asked me that, referred to the fact about the media sort of thing. That's changed a bit. That has changed a bit when I've seen him speak, because he was like granite in the early days. He was like granite when it got to his mid-years. He started to lighten up towards the end. He started to think, do you know what, I can enjoy this a little, rather than just think, oh no, I've got the press conference coming up the day before the game or whatever it is. Be interesting to see how he operates himself going forward. Now, I think he will come in not like Oliver Twist that many people would like to see, given what he said when he left the club about gunfights and Baines needs to go to a better club and all that sort of thing. He's going to have to come in with, I need to get these fans on side as soon as possible, really. And that's obviously results, but also it's the way in which he approaches how he is, his image. I think that's the thing in football these days, is your image, isn't it? It wasn't when back in the day when he came in. It wasn't in years up till that. It's only what you look like, what your persona's like to people.
Back then, the Dower Scott, that was the football manager, wasn't it? If you weren't a Dower Scott and you were Scottish, that was a bit like, what are you doing being a football manager? You've got to be Dower.
Yeah, exactly. It was massively difficult to get anything out of him when you went to speak to him for 10 minutes with your radio microphone. I can tell you that. But he has to have a wider perspective on what it's like if you need fans on board. And he does have that as a bit of an issue, a bit of a difficulty, because I would say that there's more fans that don't want him back than there are who do. That'll be an issue for him, but I think he's on to a winner with what he'll get on Wednesday and against Spurs the following week. And that should help him in how to get this done. If Everton go and play like absolute shite and win 1-0, I'd be going cock-a-hoop with that. But there are still fans who won't. There are still fans who will have issues, even if we go and win those games. That's what he needs to tackle in part of what he's got to do.
Yeah, it's a big ask, and it could be a blessing that we've got 4 home games in the next 5 coming up. We often talk about the Goodison atmosphere. It can bring undue pressure onto players who don't like it, but it could work in our favour over these next 5 games with Moyes being back there.
He used it very intelligent way, Les, when he was our manager. He used it really to his aid. Because our away record was crap. It was woeful under him for almost all the seasons he was there. Our away record was shocking. Goodison is his ally. And especially when you're able to say there's a new stadium. Look, there's a lot of nostalgia in Goodison there. I think he can play on that. He can sell that, because he's been there for when Goodison was in, falling apart, and what did he need? When Bill was saying about, we need to make sure that the wall isn't cracking and we're not going to fall apart, and there's going to be issues when you walk into the ground and all that sort of thing. He was there for all that. It's a different landscape for him now, and I'm intrigued, and he gets my full support.
I just think, regardless, now it's this Villa game is a lot more. I'm looking forward to a lot more now than if Sean Dyche was in charge. Something different might happen. We all know what would happen if Dyche was in charge. But huge game coming up against Villa. We'll wrap it up there, lads. This Villa game's massive now. Not the be all and end all, but at least it's something we can look forward to, because we might get something different, which is all we can ask for after the last few months.
How many Everton fans are ready with "I told you so"? I bet you people have got those tweets already in their drafts. I told you so. We shouldn't have got him in. Look at this shite that we've just played. People are ready. It's on the tip of their tongue to say that, and I really hope that everyone doesn't just turn to type and say this fella's not the Everton manager. One game at home to Aston Villa, that's what will happen. And just to finish, that is what David Moyes is against compared to what he was like in the previous year. When all of this stuff didn't exist on the internet, podcasts didn't exist when David Moyes. He's turned to that now. He's done stuff. He's done stuff at the BBC. He's done various stuff like that.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can change himself to modern world football rather than be Didder and Dave once again.
But it's all about the home form. It's all about it's not just 4 in 5, guys. It's 5 in 6 with the Bournemouth Cup game.
Oh yeah,
and in fact, it's 6 of our next 8 games are at home because we've got Man United at home, and the only 2 away games are Brighton and Palace. So we could be on a major run, and we could be pushing top half by the middle of February.
I mean, I don't want to say we're on a European charge, but it's definitely on, isn't it? Right, we will leave it there. If anyone,
Europa Conference is coming our way. 2026.
You know that Man United song, when I die and they lay me to rest, I'm going to go on the piss with Georgie Best.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking of when Everton win a trophy, I'm going to go on the piss with Dave Downey because that sounds like one hell of a bitch.
And I would say just ahead of the Villa game, if we are crap and we do get beat, it's still early days. And if you have got those tweets in your draft, remember, it's not all about being right on the internet. We all want the Toffees to do well. We'll leave it there. We'll be in with all the usual stuff before the Villa game, after the Villa game, and just leading up to the weekend, all the usual stuff that we do. Keep with the Blue Room. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Up the Toffees.